To understand how Schaefer became a monster, we first have to look at where he began. Gerard John Schaefer Jr. was born in Wisconsin in 1946, the first of 3 children. From the outside, his childhood seemed normal enough, a middle-class family that moved around a bit, eventually settling in Georgia and later in Florida. But behind closed doors, young Schaefer's life was far from ideal. His father, Gerard Sr., was an alcoholic who often lashed out at Schaefer and frequently belittled him, but favored his sister. This constant criticism and verbal abuse gave him deep resentment and anger towards his father. The more his father rejected him, he grew intensely attached to his mother, who doted on him. As a boy, Schaefer loved the outdoors. He spent hours wandering in the woods, hunting and fishing. These might seem like wholesome hobbies, but even here, early red flags emerged. A neighbor would later recall that teenage Schaefer was often killing things you can't eat, birds, small animals, that sort of thing. He wasn't hunting for sport or food. He was killing small animals just for the thrill. It was a glimpse into early cruelty, a hint that young Schaefer found pleasure in causing pain. Schaefer's high school classmates remembered him as a bit of an oddball. He wasn't a loner in the classic sense. He played on the football team for a while and got decent grades, but socially he was always reserved and often spent time alone. He had a reputation for harassing his female classmates. One vividly recalled that she and the other girls learned never to wear skirts around Schaefer unless they held the hems tight. He would literally contort himself to peek up the girls' skirts. It was more than teenage antics. It was creepy even then, peeping in women's windows at night, becoming a full-blown peeping Tom in his mid-teens. In his mind, he twisted these girls into villains, accusing them of encouraging him by simply living their lives. He would later admit that he despised them as sluts and whores. By his late teens, he was consumed with violent sexual fantasies. Schaefer later admitted that as a teenager, he would tie himself to a tree, gag himself, and fantasize about torturing and killing women. He had a girlfriend when he was 14, and Schaefer would make her take part in the role-play fantasies in which he tore her clothes off and raped her. She broke the relationship off after 3 years. Each time he pushed the envelope a little farther, the fantasies grew more graphic and extreme with each passing year, dominating his thoughts. As he later confessed, I would fantasize about hurting people, women in particular. It's clear Schaefer's psyche was twisted long before he ever wore a badge. To the outside world, Schaefer was just considered odd. He graduated high school and went into college aiming to become a teacher. For a moment, it looked like he might channel his life down a normal path. He married Martha Fogg in 1968 and seemed to be starting a stable life. But that marriage fell apart in barely 2 years. His wife cited extreme cruelty as the reason she left him. His brief marriage over, Schaefer was adrift. He'd been fired from the student teaching job for pushing his own views on students and clashing with school authorities. He managed to land a job as a police officer in the small town of Wilton Manors, Florida, in 1971. He hid his past teaching fiasco failures on his application to get on the force. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just a rookie cop trying to prove himself. But it didn't take long for his true colors to seep through the cracks. Schaefer quickly started abusing his position. He had an MO even as a cop. He'd pull over women driving alone for the smallest of infractions, any excuse to flash the lights and make a stop. Instead of tickets, he had something else in mind. Schaefer would flirt and try to ingratiate himself, and then later use the police database to look up these women's personal information. Armed with their phone numbers or addresses, he would call them up and ask them out on dates. Schaefer's superiors found out about his behavior, and after only about 6 months on the force, he was fired for conduct unbecoming an officer. Schaefer was desperate to stay in law enforcement. It gave him a hunting ground and a sense of power he couldn't give up. In June of 1972, he struck gold. The Marin County Sheriff Department decided to take him on as a deputy sheriff. He forged a glowing letter of recommendation from his previous department to help secure this position. Now he had a badge again. Just a few weeks into his new job, Deputy Schaefer was back to his old tricks and worse. In July of 1972, a date that would mark the beginning of the end for Schaefer's career and the beginning of a nightmare for 2 young, innocent girls. On that summer afternoon, Schaefer was on patrol when he came across 18-year-old Nancy Trotter and 17-year-old Paula Wells hitchhiking on the road. Hitchhiking was a fairly common then, and these 2 teenagers were trying to get to the beach. Here was a perfect scenario for Schaefer's twisted urges. 2 vulnerable young women who would likely trust a lawman. Schaefer didn't miss a beat. He picked them up in his patrol car, playing the role of a concerned officer. He lectured the girls about how dangerous hitchhiking was, telling them they could end up hurt or worse. The irony is thick. He was warning them about exactly himself. The girls told him that they were new to Florida and planned to hitchhike to Jensen Beach the next day. Schaefer saw an opportunity and offered them a ride. Grateful and unsuspecting, Nancy and Paula agreed to meet him the next morning for a ride to the beach, thinking he was a policeman. The following day, July 22, 1972, the girls met Deputy Schaefer as planned. But this time he wasn't in uniform. He arrived in his own car, saying he was working undercover that day, and that's why the plain clothes and the unmarked vehicle. Any amount of doubt the girls might have had vanished with that explanation. They got in the car, and Schaefer headed off, ostensibly toward the beach. However, it wasn't long before the girls realized they weren't heading to any beach. Schaefer turned down the remote road, deeper and deeper into the wilds of Hutchinson Island, a swampy, underdeveloped area. When the girls questioned where they were going, Schaefer mentioned something about showing them an old Spanish fort in the woods. In truth, he was setting a trap. Far from the prying eyes, Schaefer stopped the car near a rundown shed in the dense woods. Suddenly, his friendly demeanor evaporated. He pulled a gun, and the girls' confusion turned into pure terror. Schaefer handcuffed and gagged both Nancy and Paula before they could even think to run. He grabbed them and dragged them into the trees. The girls must have been scared out of their minds, hearts pounding, not thinking clearly. This was a policeman and now bound their hands tightly behind their backs. He marched the girls a short distance to the 2 sturdy trees that he had decided would work for his purposes. Using a rope from his car, he fashioned nooses and slipped them around the girls' necks, tightening each noose and throwing the rope over a branch. Then he forced each girl to climb onto the exposed roots at the base of the trees, their only footing. With cruel precision, he tied their legs to the tree trunks and secured the rope so that if the girls slipped or moved too much, the noose would strangle them. Nancy and Paula were now literally standing on tiptoe for their lives, bound and gagged, each balancing us on a small root with a noose biting into their neck. One wrong move, passing out or falling asleep, and they would hang. Schaefer reveled in their terror. He reportedly taunted them, making it clear what he intended. He would rape and then murder them. At that moment, the girls believed they were going to die in the woods and die in agony. But then, in a bizarre twist of fate, Schaefer was interrupted. His police radio, which he had left on, crackled to life with an urgent call from dispatch. The sheriff needed all units, including Schaefer, to respond immediately to a real police matter. Schaefer was caught off guard. He had to go, at least for a little while. He told his captives almost casually, "I gotta go. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back for you."